Hi, I'm Joseph Phillips. I'm the founder of Pure Management Alliance, and I'm the director of education at instructing.com. Welcome to this first in many series of webinars where we talk about project management, talk about pure project management, and about what's happening in the industry. Tonight, I have with us one of my favorite instructors. She's been part of Pure from our very beginning, and that's Tanya Boyd. So Tanya, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to work with Pure Management Alliance?
Sure. So I have been in project management for years. I identify as the accidental project manager. So my first beginnings or origins of project management story was really when I was working in disaster recovery for Hurricane Katrina. I had been on that contract over 3 different contractors for 8 years. And it was somebody that recognized my abilities in me and actually told me about the PMP and project management as a roadmap for my career. Luckily, I listened to them. I took their advice. I studied for the PMP. Did not get it on the first try, but I wasn't taking your course. Did get it on my second try, and that was in 2014. And from there, kind of became an evolution into different roles in different industries in project management.
Sure.
So some of that story has involved 7 years as a volunteer leader for the PMI Baton Rouge chapter. This is actually my first year being out of the volunteer leader role. So my life has kind of transformed into different industries. And last year, I was doing a lot of speaking engagements on project management, doing a lot of networking, and I was luckily enough to get contacted by you and your team in September to begin this journey with Pure, which is an absolute honor. And so this was my first rodeo of being a content creator, but since then it's actually led me to another full-time job where I'm doing content creation as well, and taking on opportunities to potentially be a PMP instructor for the ATP program. So it's been a wild journey, but it's interesting.
Well, you have such a good personality for training, and you come across very casual. I know you're very confident, so I think you'll do well in that. You have a good training personality. Tell us a little bit about the Katrina with what was happening there and your PM role there.
So I wasn't called a PM there at the time. So when Hurricane Katrina happened in August of 2005, I was actually in mortgage origination. So I was working for Wells Fargo at the time. And, when you're in that role, it's pretty much commission only.
Right.
And so I had very good customers, but I had deals blowing out for different things like appraisals, differences in rates. And one of the ladies that I was helping that was a client of mine caught me on a bad day where I'd had 3 deals blow out. And so she told me, she says, I think you're great at what you do, but I understand it's commission. And there's this new program coming up called the Road Home Program in Louisiana. They're helping to disperse federal funds to people that were impacted by Hurricane Katrina. So this was 2006, because when disasters happen, the red tape for programs to ramp up takes some time.
Sure.
So she actually, as a client of me at Wells Fargo, got me the interview with the Road Home Program. I started as one of what was called their underwriters, basically helping to build the policies, review the files, and then work directly with people who were impacted by the hurricane. So a lot of people thought, oh, you're with FEMA. I said, no, it's slightly different. So my role evolved to working with small rental property units and being the person that did a lot of outreach, a lot of policy, and then I got placed in peer review. So I had my own files, but I also kind of QA'd behind all the other reviewers and helped them get their files to the finish line so that way they could get the federal funds to the people needing to rebuild. So at the time it was called underwriter. Contracts with the state of Louisiana were only 3 years in duration. So it involved some transition there between companies. And it was on that third one that the person recognized me and said, "Hey, you need to do this because you have been doing project management."
Right.
So he had to educate me on the terminology, but when I reflected, I could see the stages break out from where I was there in 2006 at the inception when we were building the program, we were putting everything together to where we were planning, to where we were actually executing and people met the requirements, got the money, to where we moved into monitoring and closing, to where just meant you had to have, people that qualified as tenants, and then even closing out some of the files. So it did bring that full life cycle.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think so many people, that I've met, they've been doing project management work, but there may
Right.
not be those terms that that we have, the jargon that we have as PM consultants or trainers or whatnot. Because much of project management, I mean, much project management is just getting things done, and there's a logical approach to
Right.
getting things done and getting from point A to point B. I mean, the whole point of project management, get things done. So but it's funny. Like if we were to take a group of people, like Habitat for Humanity, or a group of people to clean out a barn, or whatever you want to do, it would be a definite end result. It would be a clear vision of where
Correct.
we want to end up. And it's funny though, the contrast that when you have that we were going in with the intent, we're going to do project management, how often they don't have a clear vision. Like they don't really know where we're going to end up. They have a loose set of requirements. So I think so many projects fail at the beginning
Yeah.
because they don't have what we have in that example of Habitat for Humanity, or what you were dealing with, or cleaning out a barn. There has to be a clear vision when you start.
Absolutely. Well, and this evolved throughout. I mean, our clearest vision, I guess, the beginning of that project, and this is in retrospect for me,
Mhm.
because when I first got on, I didn't see that vision because that wasn't even how I was brought in. But in retrospect, I can see that the clear vision was Louisiana, you get X amount of money. You have to disperse this federal money to the recipients based on these rules and regulations within this certain time frame, which there wound up being a lot of extensions. And even on that program, I watched it change. Like I watched it change from people had to have a certificate of occupancy to get any of the money to, okay, we're going to change to 30% advance, or okay, this isn't getting done. We're going to give them 50% advance to enable them to do these things. So we had to evolve with it. But the wild thing about that program was that program in Louisiana, because of Hurricanes Rita and Katrina, really set forth a very large program of standards that were used, even by New Jersey and New York when Hurricane Sandy came in. I watched my friends go in 2008 to Galveston and other areas after Ike.
Yeah,
So many of the people in disaster recovery that are way up there now were actually original players in the Louisiana contract that really set the precedent for that. I
sure.
mean, I'm sure there was stuff being done before, but not in the way and that massive scale that project was done. So,
And that's a really good point. And in project management, we don't have to start from scratch every time. It's like
right,
you have a formula that worked in a similar project, and then you stand on the shoulders of that project, and then how can we improve upon that and refine that, and then go to the next one and improve upon that and refine that. I think
right.
there's a misconception with some project managers that you have to start from scratch every time and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Most
No,
organizations are doing the same type of projects over and over. So it
right,
should be very similar. And then I'm not saying that we take shortcuts, but you leverage, that's just being smart. You're working smart. You're using that critical thinking to move the project forward as quickly as possible. So yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about your project management. So
okay.
Let's first talk about your course. If you're watching this presentation, those of you who are watching this little webinar, you may not be familiar with Pure. Pure is a collection of real world project managers teaching how projects really work, how they work out in the real world, and that you work towards a credential at the end of the program. So, Tanya, why don't you tell us your course? She's one of 20 instructors, or 20 classes in this program. Let's talk about your course and why it's unique to the program and how it relates to real world project management.
So my course, and I consider myself a risk manager, but not a risk specialist necessarily. But when I was deciding on the array of different topics that I could choose to tackle for this,
Mm-hmm.
just my life and some of the different lessons that I've learned throughout it, whether it be from loss, or even working on a program where my job in disaster recovery was because other people suffered. That gave me my
Right.
job, and it was their risks. It gave me the reward of figuring out how to help them, but I'll say since the pandemic, I'd had 3 full-time jobs. I moved from Baton Rouge, Louisiana to Lafayette, Louisiana in 2019 to be closer to my dad after I had my passing of my mother. And just in those years, it was like the pandemic came up, I guess about 10 months into living here. I went through 3 layoffs. But right now, looking back, I don't regret any of that because that gave me the opportunity to be exactly where I'm at. Had I not gone through that, I probably wouldn't have had the time and capacity to do this program, which channels more of my creativity, my abilities.
Sure.
So I really do. I know that risks are opportunities, threats, but I'm kind of an optimist at heart, although I try to be realistic. So this course is really about presenting the silver lining of risks. It's
Sure.
something that we're going to face. It's something that we're going to have to deal with, but we can adjust our mindset. So from a formal standpoint of project management, I was like, okay, people aren't going to accept just my optimistic silver lining view on this. How do I frame this with different real world scenarios that people might face? Risks of supply chain, risks of stakeholder conflict or disagreement. So that
Sure.
framed the idea. And then I additionally decided, okay, this would be fun if I had power tools to address each one of these risk scenarios so I can creatively train people on the terminology and give them ideas of tools that they might want to check into or use
Right.
at their day jobs. So
And
that was a lot of the idea behind
great.
it.
Well, I think that's one of the themes that we see throughout the program is that there is no magic recipe
No,
for every scenario. It's being able to have that flex and the nuance and to apply what works in your environment that may not be the same how it works in other environments. That uh,
correct.
projects are not uniform. It's not, installing a door where it's the same
No,
way every time. So it's the nuance. It's the ability to flex and be um, just to be flexible, but also to adapt and overcome, and that you have to make it work. So how do you do that? How do you think through not just yourself, but with your team or stakeholders or SMEs or whatever to get to that solution, to get to that end result? And then when we talk about risk in your course, you hit on something there about the silver lining of risk. Let's talk about that. How risk is not always negative. That there's always such a negative connotation to risk. So what do you mean by that? Elaborate on that a bit.
so let's just take, all right, it was a risk that became a reality. None of
Mhm.
us knew, and I am going to drive back to the pandemic because it changed our entire world.
Right.
I don't know that we all consciously knew the exact risk. I mean, I think we were all watching the news at the same time that things happened and they changed and then they transformed, and we had to react to it in a lot of ways. But that happened. That created remote worlds for a lot of people, which changed their lives. Um, it did create different opportunities that probably wouldn't have existed before. Even
Right.
these videos and all of this. I mean, and I can tell you a little bit about my story as a PMI chapter leader. We had always done in person. It was always in person. That's always what we
Yeah.
did. It was in
Yeah.
person. And so we went into it, and it took us 3 months to figure out what platform we were using. But after the 3 months, we settled on Zoom. And the project for that became keep people connected. People are so scattered, they're so dispersed, they're struggling, they want the education and they want companionship for the
Right.
loneliness too. And so my goal was we're going to find speakers. We're going to have speakers every month. We're going to create this content, keep them engaged, and keep them motivated because we all know that this is a weird new thing that we're adapting to. But that risk that became a reality taught so many of us skills that we would have never otherwise acquired.
Sure.
You were doing it before. You were doing the video for a long time, but so many
It,
of us, maybe even some in this program, we hadn't done it before, and here we are.
yeah. Well,
So,
but for years, I started teaching project management right around the year 2000, and I traveled all the time, all over the States, all over Europe. Very lucky to see so much, but I was teaching the same class to 15, 20 people at a time. So over and over and over. And like, there has to be a better way. I was going crazy. I'd wake up and am I in Chicago or am I in Kansas City? Because it just every hotel room looks the same. You're away from your family, you're away
yep.
from home. So it evolved for me into an opportunity for myself. I want to travel so much. And give the same presentation over and over and over and over. It became like it may as well have been a play that lasted 40 hours. So with the recording, we can do it once and polish it and take different takes and then publish that. So it was I was a little bit ahead of the curve. I mean, a lot of people have done this as well.
Yeah.
But you're 100% right though. When COVID hit, yeah, my online training, because my in-person training evaporated, it was gone. Nobody wanted me to come in and teach, and I sure didn't want to get on an airplane and go and stay in a hotel, and it was just
Right.
a mess. So the online training world just collapsed, but the in-person training just collapsed, but online just just mushroomed overnight.
Yep.
And so it certainly changed my life for the better. A lot of uncertainty, and it's changed the whole realm of how we teach and present. And what, but one of my goals in Pure, when we came up with this idea, and I know you were one of the first ones that we talked to about getting involved, was I wanted people that had really done it. Like, I've consulted at State Farm and consulted at IU and, other organizations, Mercedes. But the bulk of my time is teaching. And so I did not want this program to be just me teaching. I
Right.
wanted people that have done it, that have been in the field, and they have, years of experience of doing, and that's a whole wealth of knowledge, the practical application. Not to discount, guys like me that are just trainers, but I really wanted individuals like you to get involved. I'm so happy you did, but you have real world experience that through this program you can say, well, this is how it really works. I mean, it's close to what we read in a book, or it's close to what we see in the classroom or what you see on other tests, but this is real application. And so that's why I think it was so important to get you and our other colleagues that are in this program. Everybody has real world experience, and that's what our focus is, how it really works.
I can tell you, I love being part of this collective, and even the idea and what y'all did behind the scenes to pull it together, I think is fabulous because you've given life or voice to other people to share their stories and have a collection of diverse perspectives, and so I think that is so important, because I've had to realize, and this is a tip that I give to people too, because I've had people ask me, well, how do you deal with difficult stakeholders? Have you ever had a stakeholder that just will never listen to you? And I'm like, absolutely. I've had some people that no matter what I do, I will not be their cup of tea.
Right.
But I have accepted that fact. And so I've learned to sort of circumvent that risk by finding allies. So let's say, for instance, there's somebody that does not like me, is not going to make the time for me, will not listen to me, even if it's in the project's best interest.
I find that hard to believe, but go ahead.
It's definitely happened, but that's even a way to circumvent risk. People not liking you personally is going to happen to every single one of us for reasons we can explain or not explain.
Yeah.
But even knowing that might be a risk, how do I find another ally on the team that particular stakeholder that's in a level of influence may actually make the time for and listen to if I can't turn the needle? And to me, that's risk mitigation in a different direction. And even like other experiences that I had, especially in government. Once I got into government, your risk is the administration changing. I mean, we just had this on a political level. I've seen it at a state level. Yeah. And even in Louisiana, on the state level, it goes from one party to the next party to the next party. It never seems to stay consistently connected. And you can almost read the writing on the wall, and you can say, these people at the top are going to leave these positions, which is going to make these middle managers confused on who they report to. They're going to have to get used to new personalities in play and acclimate to new ways of working. And I've had we'll address that when we get there. I'm like, oh, we'll be there in a month. I don't want to talk about how we plan to do this in advance. And sometimes that answer is no, but it's just risk is personality, preferences, communication styles. It's the weirdest thing. So like the tools, I wanted to use strategic tools. I wanted to use technical tools, but then I also wanted to use things like an emotional intelligence assessment. That's not things that every project manager has in their back pocket, but they should be thinking through those things, because people are more complicated than processes.
Exactly. I say all the time that your people do the project work, not plans, not AI, not pieces of equipment. It's people. That's always the most complicated part of a project, are the personalities and the people. And, sometimes you'll have overwhelming group of stakeholders that are happy about the project and they want the project to move forward and they want to get involved. But there's always that one. It just seems like there's always one that's a bit obstinate. And they always kind of stand out or throw up objections or, kind of get in the way. And you have to, even if there will always, even if that one is kind of like, compared to your worst project, that one's great, but on this project, they're the problem child, as it were. And so it's how do you manage that personality? I like what you said, that it's politics in a way that you like. We're don't talk about politics, but everybody knows it happens. And so you're kidding yourself if you don't. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but it means you have to deal with the way that.
Agreed. And it doesn't matter which party or what your beliefs are. You, as a project manager, when you're over influence and you're overseeing multiple stakeholders, I believe everybody is entitled to their opinions. That's fine. I will never, ever, religion, preferences, everything. I'm fine with that. But like in my head, I have to be prepared to navigate differently, because some people's preferences and opinions are going to get the better of them. And we see a lot of heated dialogues and discussion. And points that are more sensitive that maybe aren't always as sensitive. And so even understanding how that influences people and being prepared
Right.
to
Right.
diplomatically handle things is good.
Exactly right. That and you know there the office politics are these power struggles or you a perception of power or a perception of a
Mhm.
threat that are very real to that individual that may have nothing to do with your project or what you're trying to accomplish. And so that introduces a risk that may be a decision maker or they drag their feet a little bit to make a decision or give you the information you need. They have something going on over here that we're not always privy to as the PM.
That's so true. And especially in a tricky economy. And I mean, I can tell you even in my experiences in disaster recovery, and I've been on contract since, but that was my first introduction to how much that changed things. We were all on board at the beginning of this project, and so many people were close and friendships, and everything was absolutely wonderful. Now we knew it was a 3-year duration. We knew there was an end date. However, when it got about 4 months from the end date, fear took over. People started behaving differently, looking side-eyed, tattling on people because
Yeah,
they were jockeying for power because there was that fear of being laid off.
sure. Yeah.
And so I found it weird. I was just like, huh, okay, this is really strange, because I wasn't in a top, I wasn't in a top position. I wasn't top management. It wasn't that. But I was onboarded quickly for the next contract. And some of the other people who sent me their resume that I helped to get roles, it was the strangest thing because later they were like, you got on before me. And it was this weird dynamic. And I was like, but I helped get your resume through the door too. I was like, this is not a power thing. I
Yeah.
had no control over that. But it just fear is another unique thing too to manage in project management
Mm.
when there's a lot of change in the organization too, just knowing that you may have to navigate differently because of that to get people to do what's needed to be done when they're scared of being laid off. It's
Right. One of my first large projects, like multi-million-dollar projects, was for an organization. I won't say who, but they were leaving. They were leaving the Macintosh environment. This was like in the late '90s, early 2000s, right before Y2K. They were leaving the Mac environment to go to a Windows environment. And if you remember back in that era,
I
back when I
remember
had
Y2K thinking everything was going to end. Like I remember my New Year's Eve
exactly,
and I was laughing about things, but people were
yeah,
really, whew, it
and
was
that
something.
and people that were the Apple fans despise the Windows crowd and how clunky it was. And there was a huge contingency of folks that were not moving along with the
Mhm.
project. And more than any other risk on that project was people. More than any other hurdle was people. And
Viva
I
la
was
resistance.
and
Yeah.
something that stuck with me was so the sponsor, we had this meeting and with like key stakeholders from all the different lines of business. And he said, we pay you to do it, not to like it. And so his risk mitigation was just because like we're moving forward with this. And that,
Yeah.
that stuck with me for a long time. That sometimes you just have to be blunt. Not always, but sometimes you have to be blunt. Like this is the decision. There's nothing else to talk about. But other
Right.
times, like you're saying, is yeah, we have to be a little bit more savvy in those conversations to lead people to the solution rather than tell them the solution. Yeah.
There's been times I've had to flip on, I guess, the bad cop hat. There was another project I was on. It was a large systems modernization project, but one of my sideline roles was as a safety officer. For a while, I was kind of like second in command. So I got to walk around and be the good cop. And then he got busy on things, and we found out some different things that we needed to really get our documents in order to pass the safety audit. So I had to flip on the different hat. And it was really kind of fun to wear because people didn't see it. And they were like, "You're kidding, right?" No, I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
We need to
right.
get this done. And it was funny for them to deal with me on a stern dynamic, but in that I was actually thankfully able to really influence them,
Mm-hmm.
put that under them to get the things done, paint exactly how detrimental it would be if we didn't get this done,
Right.
and we were able to accomplish it. So, but
Let's
it's task switching and hat switching.
right. Yeah.
It's wild. It's
And
so
that I think some of that comes with, as you get more and more experience, you recognize, you've seen it before, that of how you have to behave to get the project to move forward.
absolutely.
Well, let's wrap up our conversation and just talk a little bit about the Pure program
Okay.
and what it is, why people should get involved. So let's begin with that question. Why did you get involved with Pure?
Because it was a great
Yeah,
opportunity. And
great.
so the timing for me, and this was funny, I was actually on vacation whenever I got I was in between jobs. So this past 2024 was a transition year for me out of working
Mhm.
full time. I was doing contract work. I was doing a lot of speaking for PMI chapters. I was starting to grow, my legs and that. And so when I first received, the opportunity, I had to say, okay, I've never done this before. I want to do this. And then
Yeah,
it kind of became, all right, this is going to be an exciting opportunity. It's going to force me to get more comfortable with video skills. It's going to force me to stick to a timeline to create new content quickly and figure out how to navigate that. And then it's going to force me to also create something that lives, much like your motivation for doing video because you were tired of always being on a plane and not knowing where you were and not always being home. Time is it's an important resource for us. And I've
right.
been stretched too thin, and there's a lot of things that I want to do. There's a lot of things I want to get to. And so
Mhm.
having that opportunity to create a living product and
Right.
gain that confidence skill was important.
Why
So that was
should
my why.
why should individuals watching this, why should they consider Pure?
Because of the diversity, because of the people, because of the different levels of experience. And that's what I love, what you've done with this. All of the different men, the different women, the different ages, the different experiences, the different industries. I know a lot of people who've worked in the same industry their entire life. And so it's hard to contextualize different things. But again, with the economy, I've seen people who've been working at where they're at for 25 years get laid off. And
Mhm.
they've only worked under this one hat.
Right.
So I think being allowed into the multi-universe of all of us from different perspectives, different states, and even different countries, the military experience, the startup, the entrepreneurs, it's exciting. It
It's
just gives them a very well-rounded education of
right.
tangible people who are on LinkedIn, who are accessible, who are doing educational things and helping others.
Right. I think hit the nail on the head is that is to me one of the most appealing parts of the program and why it took so long to get going. I wanted to make sure that we had a big variety of people. And like you just said, we have people that are retired that are coming back to offer their advice, and we have people that are very young in their career and everything
Yep,
in between, and they all have real world advice to give. I think is
yep,
the big value, where I'm not just following a prescription that we see in other credentials, that it is, how do I really do this? Like, this is how it should work. But we have folks like yourself, and other people that you watching will see in this space coming up, that have been doing this out in the real world. And they're not just a trainer, that this is, like Tanya alluded to, this is something that is in addition to the role of PM, not a trainer trying to be a PM.
Right.
So it really took the whole model and put it upside down. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We've got just a huge group of trainers with different topics with practical application. If Tanya, if let's wrap up with if you're imagine a project manager out there watching this, if you were to give that individual one piece of advice on how to be a better project manager, what advice would you offer?
Don't be scared of change. Embrace it. Figure out your strategies in advance. Kind of think, even the risk, think through what could happen. But just be okay with change. That's going to be the thing that always keeps coming. So use it as an opportunity to keep evolving.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to thank you for your time as
Thank you.
we introduce Pure to the world. And if you want to learn more about Pure, stop by our website. It's puremanagementalliance.com. There's a 1-hour free class. We get one PDU that will lay out the whole program and give you some insight to the Pure framework, that it is a framework unlike any you've seen before that I've developed in my career over the past 20 years. And so you can see that for free and take from it what you like. No obligation to buy anything. So come over to puremanagementalliance.com. Again, Tanya, thank you for your time. And I'm so happy that you're in the program.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.